I have read hundreds of books, as you can probably see from the shelf behind me, and there are five in particular that stand out that have made such a difference in my life. These are the five books that I constantly recommend and the ones that are so meaningful and impactful in my life. So, in this episode, let's dive into these five books and why I recommend them so much and why they mean so much. And maybe some of them could be spotted here behind me. The very first book is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. This is one of the first books in personal development that I read, and it had such an impact on my life. I've read it multiple times, I've given workshops on it, I've spoken about it. It is absolutely fundamental when it comes to your own growth. Some of the core points in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People are around PPC balance, which is production capability balance. This means that everything that you produce and create, for instance, your work, comes from your production capability, your own well-being. And if they're out of balance, you're not able to produce as great a result. Essentially, what it's saying is that if you're almost burnt out or overwhelmed, you won't be able to deliver high quality work. This is something that is explained in great depth and great deal and is often a total paradigm shift when it comes to the way we work and function. Another core example of the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People that I love so much is how he speaks about this idea that our fundamental and last freedom is our ability to choose our response. This is something that comes from Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. And he explains that if we know that our latest freedom is our ability to choose our response, then we can enjoy and appreciate that and choose how we respond to life circumstances. We're the creator of our lives, not just the manager of our circumstances. And we can choose how we show up in the world and not just default to autopilot responses based on past traumas, experiences, society expectations, personality. And instead, we can choose. There's that gap between what happens and how we choose to respond to it. A very easy example would be, for instance, if you're working with a colleague and the colleague becomes slightly aggressive, maybe your instant default reaction is to just get defensive. But instead, you can pause and realize maybe the colleague is being aggressive because they've misunderstood the problem, or maybe they're just super tired, or they're going through a challenging phase, or they're scared of getting fired. Whatever it is, you can choose to pause and think, I don't actually want to respond in a defensive, prickly way, and I will take responsibility of my own response. This is something that is explained in great depth in the 7 Habits and is really totally a game changer for the way we show up in the world. The 7 Habits, and one of them in particular, be proactive, is the very first habit. And this is really a frame of reference when it comes to what I mentioned previously, which is how we show up in the world. Be proactive is twofold. It's our ability to take responsibility for what's going on, and it's also taking initiative. And this is something that I've kept in mind all through my business and through my personal growth journey, both looking at how can I change my response to circumstances, but also how can I take initiative? What's something that is being meaning to take place and I just haven't initiated or done? Developing this habit, because it really is a habit of being proactive, has probably been one of the biggest game changers in my whole business and my whole life. If you think of it now, recording this podcast episode or recording it as a YouTube video, this is a perfect example of being proactive. It doesn't just happen. You make it happen. It takes quite a bit of energy and effort to make it happen. And this is one example of being proactive. So 7 Habits of Highly Effective People is really wonderful. I don't think I could give it more praise. If you're not a reader, which happened, then maybe listening to it or watching more summarized videos, really familiarizing yourself with all 7 habits is so crucial when it comes to growing and learning and developing. So this was the very first book that has had such a tremendous impact in my life. It makes me quite emotional to think about it. Really love the 7 Habits. The second book is The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks. This book had 2 core lessons that made a big difference in my life. The first one is this concept of ULP, upper limit problem. When we're going through life and we experience happiness, we have this ceiling, which Gay Hendricks refers to as ULP, upper limit, where we don't believe that we deserve or can tolerate greater happiness and joy. If we hit this ceiling, we tend to self-sabotage and make our life worse again, or just think negative thoughts to bring down our level of joy. And what Gay Hendricks explains in the book is we need to learn to tolerate higher levels of happiness and to push that ceiling up. I would often use sentences like, I accept the happiness and joy in my life. I feel gratitude for it, and you encourage it to lift your ability to tolerate this happiness and joy. This seems weird, but if you think about it, our amygdala and our brain, they're wired for survival. So when things are going well, the brain freaks out because it thinks, surely there must be a problem somewhere. Everything can't just be calm. We're looking for threats. And because your amygdala kicks in, maybe you're having a wonderful day and you suddenly think of this horrible thing that happened years ago, or you anticipate a terrible problem that could happen in the future, or you just sabotage that entire day by suddenly being in a bad mood for no reason whatsoever. If this is something you're familiar with, then this is an ULP. And notice that this also tends to happen when things have suddenly become really great out of the blue. Something that you thought was a problem has just been solved, or you suddenly get new clients, or you suddenly get a raise, or something really nice has happened, or someone's coming to visit for the weekend. And suddenly it's as if your body can't cope and it will find a way to sabotage and reduce the happiness. And we can learn to tolerate and to increase our capacity for greater joy. And this was a concept that I learned in the book, The Big Leap. And the second core concept in that book was this idea of the zone of genius. Spoken about it many times before on the podcast. The zone of genius is where you're both excellent at what you do and you also really enjoy. So your level of expertise is very high and your level of enjoyment is very high. And what often happens is that people get stuck in their zone of excellence, which is when they're very good at what they do, but their level of enjoyment is mediocre or average or okay. But if they were given all the money and time in the world, they would quit and not do it. You want to find your zone of genius and try and spend as much time in there, which is when you have high level of expertise, high level of enjoyment, and this will make you a lot more fulfilled. If it's not something you can do in your work, then you can do it as a hobby. And if it's just one element in your work, you might want to look at how you can do more of it. And this whole concept of the zone of genius came from that book, The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks. So this was book number 2 that made such a difference in my life. Moving on to book number 3, Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now. Absolutely wonderful book. Read it over and over and over again. I actually saw Eckhart Tolle when he came to Stockholm in a big conference, heard him speak. And his core messages in the book are around how lost we get in our own head instead of being present with what's going on. How the more energy we spend in believing and getting caught up in our thoughts, the less we're able to fully enjoy life. As he said, we end up missing out on life because we are so caught up in what he calls our life situation. Instead of focusing on life, which is now, here, now, instead of that, we think about our life situation, our work, the relationships, the problems, the boss, and this distracts us from life, which is going on around us. Another core example that he talks about is our relationship to the present moment. So if we see the present moment as an obstacle or an enemy, this can happen. For instance, you're waiting in a queue and you just can't wait for it to be over. Or when you say to yourself, I can't wait for this to be over. I can't wait for it to be tomorrow. I wish I wasn't doing this right now. In those moments, you're going against the present moment. You're going against what is happening because you just want it out of the way to move on to the next thing. When you're seeing the present moment as an obstacle or an enemy, you are going against life itself, because life is the present moment. This is absolutely all we have at any given moment, past and future are always just an illusion. And if we're able to be in harmony, or at least accept the present moment, you might not love every minute of the day in the same way, but you might be okay with it or accept it or go with the harmony of the present moment, then we're so much more likely to be at peace. This is a book that I read regularly, and each time I read it, I find new epiphanies, new thoughts. It is so profound, so deep, so meaningful. Really is a totally life-changing book. So this was book number 3, The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. Moving on to book number 4, 4,000 Weeks by Oliver Burkeman. This is a highly impactful book, and I remember when I first picked it up, I thought, oh, it'll just be one of these other productivity books. After a while of reading a lot of different productivity books and books on focus and writing my own book, The Magic of Focus, I felt that I probably wouldn't learn anything new. By the way, if you ever think this when you read a book or watch something or listen to something, this is never true, because even if you know the concepts in it, you're in a different phase of your life and the concepts will speak differently to you. I know this because I've done several times Tony Robbins events, and sometimes the content was similar and yet it spoke to me in a totally different way. So this wasn't true, and it wouldn't have been true even if the book had just been productivity tips that I knew. And in this case, actually, Oliver Burkeman's book, 4,000 Weeks, is a lot deeper, a lot more depth than just some productivity hacks. There is a lot to this book. It is very philosophical. It makes you reflect on the finite time. One of the realizations I had, for instance, after reading this book is that each time I experience this wonderful new place or feeling or a nice restaurant, one of my thoughts is, oh, when can we go back again? Oh, I wish we could do this more. Or why don't we do this more often? Instead of actually appreciating what is going on now, I want to do it again. I even once had this thought as I was going to a spa retreat for a weekend, new place, never been to, in Stockholm, outside of Stockholm. And as I was walking there, I thought, oh, maybe if it's a nice place, I should go there again. I hadn't even yet arrived, and my mind was already thinking, how can I experience this again? And this is linked to what Oliver Burkeman talks about, because we want time to be infinite. And if we experience a finite moment, we want to find a way out of this. And our way out of this is, oh, let's do it again sometime. Or maybe we could just repeat this. The problem with this type of thought is it takes you out of fully immersing yourself in that experience because you're so focused on doing it again another time. And it's kind of paradoxical if you think about it. And also, maybe you've experienced this, maybe you go back to that restaurant or to that other country or wherever it is, and it's never the same as the first time. Because the first time is a whole new experience and it's a surprise and it's something new. So this illusion of let's just repeat it so that we don't have to get stuck in this finitude of life is a total illusion, and something that I realized from reading the 4,000 Weeks. It also made me reflect quite a lot on opportunity costs, because when we say yes to something, it automatically means saying no to something else. And we sometimes forget that we can't do everything. And saying yes to recording these podcast episodes means I can't be working on another project or going for a walk or seeing a friend. You can't do everything in one moment, but understanding opportunity costs also helps you to prioritize more effectively, and also helps you to find out what really matters and makes the biggest fundamental difference. This book was incredibly deep, very powerful, also had a mini existential crisis after reading it, because it does make you realize not just the finitude of life, but how meaningless in many ways everything is. But because everything is meaningless, it's actually very meaningful. So because nothing has a meaning in and of itself, because nothing is really of that importance, we're just tiny little people floating in space, because that's the case, we can actually design and create our life. So it's actually a very uplifting book. So even from this place that can sound quite harsh and dark, it actually makes you realize that there's a lot of freedom and possibilities, because if nothing matters, then we can choose what matters. So if nothing has a meaning in and of itself, we can create our own meaning. It's a black canvas that we can paint on. So there's a lot of freedom that comes from it, but it does make you question things quite thoroughly. At the time I was reading it when I also visited my grandmother for her 100th birthday, and this made me question a lot of things in my life and in my work. But this is quite healthy sometimes. It's good to press the pause button and to reflect on your life and your business and what matters and what doesn't. So this is what happened when I read the 4,000 Weeks. Very deep, very philosophical, totally changed my perspective in so many ways and helped me to feel more gratitude for each and every moment, because it is finite. So let's appreciate it a bit more and not let's get totally lost in the future, constantly planning for other things and experiences. Coming back again to this idea of presence. The last book, book number 5, is Living Untethered by Michael Singer. He also wrote The Untethered Soul, which is equally fantastic, and he also wrote The Surrender Experiment, that I also really enjoyed. Living Untethered was just that extra bit magical. Michael Singer speaks about us being made of stardust, because this is true. The elements in our bodies come from the stars. He speaks about how it's taken billions of years to arrive to this exact moment. So how dare we go against it when it's taken so long for us to come here? And the entire book is so rich in content. I would probably need to talk 10 hours and I wouldn't give it justice. It is beautiful, it's poetic, it is moving, it is philosophical, it's spiritual, it's everything you could ever want for a book. I thought he couldn't do better than The Untethered Soul, which is also a wonderful book, but Living Untethered was just a book I went back to over and over and over again as something that I want to read right now, this very second, talking about it. It helped me so much in processing emotions, in dealing with traumas, in understanding the bigger meaning of life, in reconnecting with myself, in reconnecting with the universe. It's incredible. If you've read it, put it in the comments below. Get some support here on how wonderful Living Untethered is. It came as a real joy, real surprise, and probably one of the books I read the most. Maybe with Eckhart Tolle, The Power Now, equally beautiful, different styles, different ways. I find that Michael Singer might be slightly, maybe not easier to read, but maybe more accessible. I'm not sure. They're both very great in their own ways. So I think different people will resonate with different ones. So these were the 5 books that made such a difference in my life, in my business. I also noticed they impact people around me too. The first one was The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. Each 7 habit is fantastic, and that very first one of Be Proactive in and of itself is absolutely life-changing. The second book is The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks, with this idea of upper limit problem and the zone of genius. The third book was Eckhart Tolle, The Power Now. Can't say enough how fantastic this book is, how meaningful, how deep, how impactful it has been in my own life and journey. The fourth book is Oliver Burkeman, 4,000 Weeks. Magnificent, deep, spiritual, profound book that totally changed my perception on life and what matters and what isn't important. And the last one, Living Untethered by Michael Singer. Pure magic, pure joy. Let me know in the comments, have you read one or all 5 of these books, and what are your thoughts on them? And what would be one book that I haven't mentioned that has been a total game changer for you? I love reading, as you can probably tell with the books behind me, that this is something I'm very passionate about. So I would love to hear your thoughts, some book that you've been reading that has been meaningful and deep and impactful, because this also gives me great ideas of other books to read. So please put that in the comments below. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe to The Focus Bee. It's been a great pleasure to be here today to share my 5 favorite or most impactful, life-changing books. If you're listening to this on podcast, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, please leave 5-star, write a little review. This makes such a difference to the show. I can't emphasize enough how meaningful this is. So thank you so much for doing that. And thank you for tuning in. See you in the next episode.